that moment, Lisa, I gave up on life. I gave up on pursuing anything. I gave up perseverance. I just totally gave up. I was like, why am I living? What's going on? I mean, I came to a point at that time that, this is my life. Bring on the misery. Gina loves to suffer. Give it to her. Everything. I'll just take it. I'll run. I'll take it. I'll just take it. You could be peace. You could have the happiness, and I'll just take it. And that's how I felt.
Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Gina Economopoulos. I said it wrong, didn't I? How do you say it? I'm sorry. I tried.
No, you said it great. It's Economopoulos. It rolls off the tongue.
It does. It does. I need to practice it a lot more, but thank you for correcting that. And I'm sorry that I did slaughter, even though I tried beforehand, but that's okay. Just one of my weaknesses in life. So
no problem at all.
She is going to share her story today. And I did want to touch on the book that you have written, which is Shake the Dust Off Your Feet and Walk. And I love that. It just sounds so, I don't know. It sounds so profound. And so what Gina is going to share with us today is her story. And there's a couple points that she really wants to have our listening friends get. And one of them is not to give up. And that's a huge one, right? I can't even say enough about that. Even when you feel like it, I know for me, when I feel like I want to give up, sometimes I'll just take a minute, catch myself so that I can move on again. Know you are loved. That's a big one. That was a big one for me. That was a huge one for me. And that you're not alone. So thank you, Gina, for being here. Thank you for being willing to share your story. And so tell us about you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lisa. It's an honor to be a guest on your show. Thank you to all your listeners. And it is true because I've learned that message. You're not alone, that you are loved, and do not give up the hard way.
Yeah.
So, but yet it was my journey. And it was my story. In hindsight, when I look back, would I change anything? No, because every pain, every suffering, every situation, every trauma was meant to be, become who the person I am today, where I was able to write my story, to write my memoir, to write my book, and look in hindsight and say, wow, if this could happen to me, there must be one person out there that is in such a dark place that could identify where I've been, what I share, and say, wow, if she could do it, I may not see it right now, but it could happen to me, and it can. It can. So I just want to share that with you all. And yes, I was raised in New York, from Long Island, one of 8 kids. My mom was Italian and my dad was Greek. So I know the ending of the I's, like you were sharing with your friend. That's Italian. Very loving family, unconditional love. That's where growing up, I felt the unconditional love from God, really, but never thinking it. I thought my family was the best thing. And but as being the 7th child, I was born with a lot of physical limitations, physical problems, health problems. So right off the get-go, I didn't realize that I endured pain. Right off, as a child, as a baby, I was born with a hip dislocation, so I was in a body cast. Granted, I don't remember unconsciously.
Right.
I remember.
Yes, your body remembers that. Yes, that was trauma. Absolutely.
Yes. But of course, never realized it back then.
Right.
Even
it was
until
normal.
Maybe up until it was normal. It was normal. And throughout my childhood, I had many surgeries. I inherited my dad. What my dad had was extra bone tumors. It was a great gift. So I had been through many surgeries with that, and bones to be removed, etc. And through it all, this whole time, I had a great smile on my face. Meanwhile, my siblings, all 6 of them, were athletic, tall, beautiful. And it's like, I wish I was like them. I compared myself. I wish I was like that one. And so so I kind of brought that up upon myself within my heart. It wasn't that what my parents did. It wasn't what my family did. Is what I perceived everything in my life. Like, look at me, poor me. So of course I developed a low self-esteem, which I assumed everybody has, but I'm not everybody. I don't know. As a child
Right.
growing up, I grew up as a looking for that love, looking for that love, acceptance, of belonging,
Mm-hmm.
and you try to get into this group, and you try to become someone you're not, and you want to be the center of attention. And but at home, like I said, I got that love because my parents were with me every step of the way. I mean, even in sixth grade, I fell off a bicycle and I broke my leg and I broke my femur bone,
Ooh.
and they were with me. But in my mind, it's like, poor Gina, why me? Look at everybody else, And so I once again I developed that lifestyle. I don't know what you want to call it, like a false identity of myself,
Yeah.
thinking if I was in a car accident with 10 people, everybody be walking away and I'll be shipped to the hospital. I mean, that's how I felt. And I carry that. I carry that with me throughout my life almost. Yeah, I did. I carry even throughout high school. And then even through college, I went away to college. Once again, my father was very, we were blessed because he paid for all of our education, all 8 kids. He wanted
Wow.
us to go to college. He wanted us to go away to have that life experience. So I was blessed, but I never was able to share saying, I don't like myself. I wasn't able to say I'm insecure. I wasn't, because I did get everything. I mean, it's not that we were rich. It's not that we were poor. We were very provided for. And so,
Do you think
but
do
when
you
I was,
think do you think that was why do you think that you couldn't share? Because the way you're describing your family is they're just so caring and they're there for you, they're supportive. So what happened in your little mind that made you think that you couldn't share that how you felt with your parents?
you know what, that is a great question. And I really don't know at this moment why I couldn't share.
Yeah.
I guess it's because I was trying to be like my siblings, like expectations. I wanted to be that Economopoulos athlete. I wanted, to be this. I wanted to be
Mm,
that. So, and I grew up in the 80s. I mean, and at that time, things change, even with among peers. At
yeah.
this point, there was like different groups. Like I wish I grew up with when my sisters grew up, because it was more like, nobody, everyone did their thing.
Yeah.
Here you had to be that popular person. You had to go into that popular crowd. And I was sort of like solo growing up because
Yeah.
my six siblings, two were born, close to age. Then there was Gina. And then yet there was my younger brother, Steven. My mom had him when she was 49 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
The doctor said at that time, back in the 70s, 73, saying the baby may be, whatever.
Yeah.
But he was a golden child, he
Mm.
taller than me, blonde hair, blue eyes, and to this day he's a great brother. And so there was no particular reason. And also everybody saw me as Gina Lola Brigida. Everybody saw me because I never complained. They said, oh, look at Gina, she smiles. So because I just never complained. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I'll take it. I'll take it, because I was used to it. I
Mhm.
was used to it. Like every year I could remember throughout my childhood, like every year something happened to me. Yeah, whether it's going in the hospital for a day, something. And so I
Do
would always say, what's going to happen to me this year?
Do you think that maybe because what crosses my mind, I'm thinking I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, right,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
kind of
please do.
understand as a little girl, but you're describing that all your brothers and sisters are healthy and they're tall and they're athletic and they're this and they're that, and then every year something happens to you.
Yes.
I could see where you would even think you're a burden.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, but I just went along with life and say,
Right.
okay, what's going to happen to me? I went throughout life, a poor pity, self pity. Look
Right.
at me, look at me. Oh, I can't get a break. So here, when I was in college, I was away from my family, and I was like, I went wild, I went crazy. That's where I was really drinking, and I was trying, once again, being popular
Yeah.
among the college scene, the college crowd, like who could drink the fastest, who could do this. And I liked it. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is it, and I did. That's what I did in college. I mean, I did get a degree, believe it or not, and I can't believe it, in social work. and I became a great pool shark, a billiard player, so everybody knew me by that. I know, you know what, I in hindsight, Lisa, it was like there was a soul sickness. There was an emptiness inside me
Yeah. Yep.
trying to fill. Granted, I was raised Catholic. We went to church every Sunday, received my catechism,
Yeah.
but yet, that's not cool. That's not cool for a kid,
Yeah.
to be to love God or be in church or go to
Hmm.
prayer. No, no. As much as my parents encouraged us to do the extra curriculums at the church, no, we'll go to mass. And then, of course, at college, mom and dad's not around. Don't need to go to mass. That's it. Don't need to. I don't even know if, I mean, the only prayer I knew is to give mom and dad plenty of patience. That was the only prayer I grew up with, like that. So I didn't have a relationship with God or with a higher power, with something, it was just
Hmm.
my insides. There was a soul sickness, like I shared. There was an emptiness. There was, I didn't like myself. I just I felt inadequate with myself, and even among others. And that's why I drank. I
Yeah.
drank so I could be someone. Oh yeah, I could be that one standing on the pool table, whatever. I could
Right.
do that.
Hmm.
And then
That's
the
the
next
one.
day is like, yeah, the next day I'm like, oh God, and then I do it again, like I
I.
didn't care.
Yep.
I didn't care, and I would start early in the morning, more in the morning. So I did more of that drinking instead of the studying. But yet I graduated. I got a degree, or a diploma, whatever you want to call it. I received it. Now during this time, my parents. So six of the siblings are like off on their own life. They have married or have kids, jobs, and here my younger brother was still like in high school because, like I said, my parents had him later years in their life. So when I graduated, my parents had moved from Long Island and moved out to Pennsylvania to be close, because they couldn't retire. They still had a 13-year-old son, or
Yeah.
14. My brother was at the time. So, and at the time, my sister had she met her husband. They settled in Harrisburg, PA, and so they're like, okay, we'll go halfway, semi-retired, be with Steven, and then when Steven goes off to college, we'll go to Florida, do that 6-month thing. And because they were still responsible for another kid, and even myself. I mean, even though I graduated from college, my mother, so cute, a little Italian lady, said, Gina, we built an extra room for you if you want to come and live with us.
Oh.
Because usually after college, everybody doesn't want to go back to their parents.
Yeah.
They just like off, or
Yeah.
sometimes parents don't want their kids to come back.
Yeah.
We
More.
get
Yeah.
we gave you an education, go off.
Go.
But
Go.
my
Grow
mother
up.
was like, yeah, and they never forced anything. And at that time, it was like the best option for me is to move to Pennsylvania. And I remember being so upset. I really didn't want to, but it was the best option. And so I'm back living with my parents. My brother's still, like, now we're junior high, high school, and I had to get a job. And what does every college student do? They try to get a job until they get their real job, like a night.
Yes.
So I became a bartender. I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Oh
So
boy.
I went from college bartending, and meanwhile I started falling in love of bartending because of the scene. You get all those crazy drunks, and I was one of them. And at the same time, you were social working because they would come in and
Hmm.
talk about their problems. And I'm a good listener, by trade, and I have a great heart, and a good listener. And I would listen, and then I would give them my advice, whatever. And then I'd take their money, and then that's it. Goodbye. I didn't have to deal with the paperwork, the government trying to get, okay, goodbye. Goodbye, bye bye, and so I enjoyed that, and so I stopped looking for a real job. And then I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go cross country, become a bartender, go from place to place. I love to travel. And then I thought of, hey, I'll work on the cruise line. What's the
Oh.
best place? And so, and that's, in hindsight, I was searching. I was still searching where I belong.
Hmm.
Now, mind you, Lisa, when I was 18, before I went to college, the reason why I went to college, because it happened to my siblings, that they found a man, they found they got married, and they got a job. It's like, that's me. That's me. That's what I'm going to do. But I didn't, I never found, I didn't have a steady boyfriend or a man to get married, because at the age of 18, not only I wanted to get married, I wanted to have like 6 kids by the time I was 25, because that's how much I loved being in part of a large family, with my parents. So I was like, that's it, white picket fence, everything's
Yeah.
going to be great, be a house mother or housewife, whatever it may be. And, but that didn't happen. So anyhow, so I was bartending at the time, and my mom, back in 1991, she was diagnosed with cancer. And so, they gave her 4 to 6 months to live, because she was terminally ill with bone cancer right from the get-go.
Bless her heart.
Yes. And at the same time, I didn't know, what cancer was about. I didn't know what terminal illness was about. I was now 23. My younger brother goes off to college the day after diagnosis, first year of college. All the other siblings are out already in their life. And once again, poor Gina. She's, like putting it on hold, which I didn't mind because I love my mom. But, in hindsight, it's like, okay, I'll take care of mom. I'll be here with my dad. And we did. We took care of her. I was bartending, taking care of her. She was my main focus. But we tried everything to keep her alive, whatever at that time that we knew about. And but she died in 5 months. So she died. She was diagnosed in August. She died the following January. And now this is where I would say the beginning of my spiritual journey started, because when she died, I literally died. I was now, 23, 24. You need your mom. I know you lost your mom at a young age too. And they say in the young ages, even in their 20s, you need your mother, you go through everything.
Yeah.
And so here, when mom died, I died too. My siblings, of course, they helped out during those 5 months, coming in and out, but they weren't there 24/7, because my mother became a child. She was my mother. She became a friend of mine after, in college, after college. And then at the end of her life, she became my child, because I took care of her.
Yep.
And I would do it again. At the time, Lisa, I didn't have any faith. I didn't have any hope. God wasn't in my life. I mean, granted, my mom being very faithful. My parents took out the rosaries, took out the novenas, took out like everything. And seeing my mom, she never complained. She never complained about her pain. She complained about having cobwebs in the corner, but she never complained. I was like, what are you doing? So she really died gracefully, that I see now. But back then I was trying to hold on to her.
Sure.
I was holding on.
Yeah.
And so when she died, at the wake and the funeral, it was my first experience of real grief in my life.
Yeah.
And everyone would say, your mother's with God. She's in it, all these nice words. And I was like, I don't want to hear that, because she's not with me.
Yeah.
She's not with me. And so when, after hearing them saying this, that she's with this God, so I was like, okay, I was on another path. What is the meaning of life? What is death? What is God? Who is God? What is this God person? So I did. I went back to church, but it was like on a off time. Went into the church, nobody there. And I literally said, and I vocaled it out, and I said, hey, God, they tell me that you're here. I don't want to talk to you. So you could leave right now, and I want to talk to my mom.
Oh.
And that's how I felt.
Well, yeah.
And so, but for a good, I grieved step by step from the beginning. I would say I was the best griever then. I knew how to grieve. It took me a while to really get back into life. So I did, I was going to church. I started going back to church because I have my Italian relatives that are very active into the church. And I was like, okay, I'll go. They would just drag me along. I would be crying. And meanwhile, like my siblings, they were back into their life. Not to say that they didn't mourn for my mom, but they were occupied. And then people would say to me, oh, do go back to what you did before mom's death, I said I took care of her. How can you, how
Yes.
can,
Yeah,
how,
that's one thing people don't realize that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say
no,
this,
don't
that
be.
those that are caregivers, and I've been in that position 3 times in my life, and, that consumes you. When you become their caregiver, that consumes you, and then they die. And then what do you do with all this time that you had where you were spending worrying about them, thinking about them, taking care of them, that absolutely consumed you, and now they're gone and you've got all this time, and it's such a mind
Yeah,
shift, and you can't just go back to what you were doing before. You don't even remember what
no,
you were doing before you were a
no.
caregiver? Hey, thank you for listening so far. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode.
No, and so I didn't even bartend because I just couldn't. I was
Yeah.
clinging on to my dad. My dad took it very hard too. I mean, I never
Mm.
saw him really cry. He was crying every day, and so
Oh.
I hung on to him, and we went traveling, and because I was afraid he was going to die. I was
Oh,
afraid that
yeah.
he was going to leave me because
Sure.
he, him, and granted, another gift I received back then is that my dad and I developed an extra relationship too, of taking care of my mom, being there for her. So
Right.
we do, and so, and then eventually I did have an aha moment in the church. As I'm doing this searching and going like, oh my God, there is a God. There is a resurrection, where every Christian was supposed to know it on Easter Sunday. It was like, oops. I got knocked off the bar stool, like, oops, a conversion of St. Paul falling off the horse. Oops.
Yes.
And so I went from one extreme of living a life of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is, a dark place or whatever. And then I went to the other extreme, like, yeah, everybody's going to hell. Not in that sense, but, like going, like a
Save everyone.
crusade.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and so in that, I became a Catholic nun. I was like, yes, I'm joining the nunnery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously, it's in my book.
Oh my goodness, how interesting having a life like that. And I mean, forgive me for saying this, but they accepted you, because I don't know a lot about becoming a nun. I had a friend in high school who actually became a nun, and I know she was very careful about the way she lived her life in order to be accepted as a nun. So tell us about that. That's fascinating.
Yes, like I shared with you, I had gone during, as I'm grieving, searching for the meaning of life with my mom. Like I said, I came back to my Catholic roots, and then in that, it was like, okay, I I got more involved in the church. I got into the young group prayer group, and I'm like, yeah, this is it. And it was like, wow, I was loving God. I was loving God and
Yeah.
loving Jesus, and and then there was one time my cousin connected me with a community, a Franciscan community in the South Bronx, and I went on a pilgrimage with them. We went to go see Holy Father John Paul II in Denver, Colorado. This is back in 1993, and so I'm like, here I am, like, living like flip flops, t-shirt, you know what I mean, like living like a pilgrim, and when I met this order, which is made of men and women, friars and sisters, I was like, oh my God, look at these young people loving God and having fun. And so I did. I had a real transformation from going from one. And you're right, because it wasn't like I joined the order right away. I didn't. It wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 years later. But at that time, it was like, okay, I can't do this. I can't drink. I can't, I mean, yeah, a little bit of that, and I, live a good life and everything like that. And they accepted me because everybody loved me, Lisa. That's one
Aw.
thing. Like I said, I always had a smile, even as a kid. Even everybody loved Gina Economopoulos. How could you not? Because I was a people person. Like this. I have a heart of service, and so by nature, and I would be like everyone helping. So they all like, well, oh God, you could join us. You could join us, and it was a fairly new order. The sisters were. So I did. I joined in 1997. I started. I was like, yes, this is it. This is my life could be. And but 12 years later, I got kicked out. So,
Wow,
and as you can
that's a
tell,
long
I'm not.
time.
Yeah, I got. Yeah, I mean, it was.
What
What's
did you
that?
do to get kicked out?
I, you know, I didn't kill anyone. Okay, I did not kill anyone. I was treated that I felt like I killed someone.
Oh,
In the beginning, it was a honeymoon stage in any kind of marriage. Honeymoon. This is what I want. I did have, the superior, my spiritual director, and I trusted them and I believed in them because they would say that, God wants you here. So that was my, listening to them. They're hearing God's voice. And so I'm like, and like I said, we worked with the poor. We're Franciscans, and I just loved working in the community, with the dying, with the youth, with the gangs, with you name it, with other visiting people,
yeah.
and just bringing that love. Because yeah, like I said, even with that resurrection, it's like I got a relationship with God, and I'm like, yeah, I want everyone else to have that, or to share that, or
Right.
what. Yeah. So, but then as time was going on, like I said, it was a new community. So, and anything new, it just became more difficult. It made it
Mm-hmm.
difficult for me to be me.
Ah,
They in a way, like I said, I have a personality plus, and I was trying to do what they said, but my spirit was going against it. And it
yeah.
wasn't like I killed anyone. It was just
No.
all exterior.
Yeah.
Um, in hindsight, at that time, they were dysfunctional. Like any kind of
Sure.
if you're familiar with a dysfunctional family, two sickies can't make a wellie. Granted, I loved God that time, and I spread the word, and I married him, Lisa. I married him. I laid down my life. Like 700 people witnessed. They came to the church in the South Bronx and witnessed my laying down my life of poverty, chastity, obedience for the rest of my life. That I married God. And once again, it was like at that time, it was like a honeymoon,
Sure.
peace. There was such peace, like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. Now, prior to that, I was struggling. Prior to that, I was experiencing suffering from the hands of the community, prior to that. And I remember my cousin, the day I was making final vows, he takes my hand. He says, Gina, are you sure you want this? Because he knows on the outside that this community is dysfunctional. And he knows
Mm-hmm.
on how unhappy there were times I was. And I'm like, yeah, I want this because God wants me to have this. Like, how can I not? I'm at peace. And should I have listened to him? Probably, but I wouldn't have, it wasn't at the time.
Right.
So I did go forth. And then at that time, then of course, uh, like for the Christians, they understand, Jesus has like a glory of Mount Tabor, like a real peaceful time. And then all of a sudden he goes down the mountain, and he goes to the cross of pain and suffering. And that's what I've experienced. That's what I experienced in the last 2 years of
Mm.
my religious life. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering, rejection, hurt, fear. I was like walking
Mm-hmm.
on fear. Like,
Yeah.
am I going to get yelled at? Am I going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, the last 2 years, they had come up to me because they feel like they didn't know what to do with me, and it wasn't like I was trying to be me, and they wouldn't let me be me.
Yeah.
Me as someone loving God, but they wouldn't let me be me because became like a cookie cutter. Like if you don't
Yeah.
sit up like this, if you don't do this, if you don't do this, exterior things, external things, external,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like you don't fit in. You don't fit in. So I was going to my spirit was going against that. And then about 2 years before I actually left, they sat me down. There was three of the top sisters, because now at this point, even though there was a time where I was second person in charge, I became the low. They kept taking away authority from me and
Oh.
everything, and so. But meanwhile, so they took. I think we had a meeting, and they said, we need a break from you. That's how they started. I was like,
Wow.
okay. So from that moment forward, they had a long break from me. I was sent away. I was isolated. I was searching.
Mm.
And I was like, once again, I became so empty on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then after being away here and there and going for help, I went to a place where they did therapy for sisters and priests and brothers, and I was on for
Oh.
therapy for 4 months, and during those 4 months, was run by nuns. They would see, okay, are you fit to have do you have a vocation? Because, when you marry God, it's a vocation. It's it's supernatural grace.
Right.
And they said yes. And they said I was an asset to this community. So, okay, let me go back into the community, try it. But it just, in the long run, this is all in my book. There's a lot of more details about that experience that I went through. And then doing all this that they asked me to do, putting my blood, sweat, and tears into
Yeah.
it. I did experience a great peace. And then they still didn't like that. And then I had another meeting with the superior and says, well, I don't think you belong here anymore. For about many years, they say you belong here, you belong here. Now they say you don't belong here.
Yeah.
So that was another transition of my life.
Mhm.
And I was bewildered, one would say, like, why is this happening to
Yeah.
me? How did this, and even in those 2 years, I was like, really? Religious people can do this to me? Like, I didn't
Right.
understand.
I'm
I didn't,
100% there with you. I can remember thinking of, you go into church and it's a church of wonderful, loving, caring people. No, it's a church of sick people. There, the
yeah, and
same thing happens in churches that happens outside churches, but it's worse in the church because you're walking into it not expecting that. You're expecting something
yeah.
better. Yeah.
Amen, Lisa. Because so then when I left, now I'm in my 40s. So it's like, okay, what do I do? Because we lived an austere life, full habits, slept on the floor, etc., etc. Didn't have any
Wow.
material things like that. During that last 2 years of the sisterhood, I met a friend, a family, and they ran a home for men and women with disabilities in New Jersey. So, and when this came in, and she was familiar with what was happening, she kind of helped me out. And she goes, do you want to come and be a house mother to our men and women with disabilities? And I was like, okay, because I didn't know what to do. I was so broken. I was
Yeah.
totally broken, very confused. Why is God doing
Gosh.
this? I still believed in God, but I was like, why is God doing this? So
Right.
so I did. I went there. It was a great transitional place for me. I was there for 2 years. I received unconditional love from these men and women with Down syndrome,
Yeah.
autism. I mean, that was like, wow, back again, unconditional love,
Hmm.
unconditional love. Broken on the inside, but unconditional love. And being with them for 2 years, I was to a point where I was just tired of serving. I was tired of putting
Yeah.
myself out there. So I chose to come to the Jersey Shore because I grew up around the beach. I love the beach. That's where heaven and earth meets. And I'm like, okay. So I came, I had to learn how to rent an apartment. My dad was alive at the time and he was very supportive and helping me out, whatever I needed. And then, of course, I needed a job. So I went back to bartending because that's the only thing I knew. So it was only bartending, sister, and a bartender. That's the only thing I knew in life. Never had a 9 to 5 job, never like had kind of responsibility like that. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that these were jobs, but what the world expects of anyone.
Right.
And so I bartended. Nobody knew I was a nun because at this point I didn't tell anyone that I
Hmm.
was a sister. I used to right after I left the convent and realizing that I'm not going back into religious life and that I wanted to date. I used to meet these guys, whether they were in the bar or in the train, and I would tell them my whole life story that, yeah, I was a nun and I was this and this happened to me. And never heard from them. Never heard. I was like, okay, okay. So a friend of mine says, don't tell them you were none or anything like that. Yeah, because I was always open and honest with my
Yeah.
life. Yeah, and so I bartended, and that's where Danny, a gentleman, walked in, and we became friends. And he was a drinker and didn't really notice anything at first. And we went out on a date, and we started liking each other, and we started having a relationship with each other. And then finally, I told him I was a nun. He was a retired cop. He didn't scare him, and then I come to find out he was an alcoholic,
Mm.
and that didn't scare me. But yet I didn't. I had a lot of blinders in my life, so to speak. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't aware,
Common.
and yeah, it wasn't just meant to be. God didn't give me those open eyes or
Yeah.
whatever, in certain situations. So when I found out he was an alcoholic, I was like, okay, can you stop drinking? Can you stop drinking? I mean, that's what I thought. Can stop drinking,
Right.
and so and for my drinking, I stopped because I wanted him to stop. I want because he was a great guy, and he was going back and forth, and then he found sobriety, and I was like, okay, at least I'm like thinking this is it. I finally get my white picket fence because with marriage and everything, and he found his sobriety out in the West in Arizona. And I was like, okay, Danny, you go out there and I'll come out there and we'll get a white picket fence in Timbuktu, whatever supports your sobriety.
How old are you at
And
this
it's
point?
like, I'm about 48 at
Okay.
this time.
Okay.
48.
You've lived a life.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm about 48. And so Danny, back in 2012, he came back to the East Coast to get his truck because he found sobriety. He found a job. We're like, yeah, I'm like, thank you, God. This is awesome. This is what I've been wanting for. Like something good can happen to Gina. Yeah. And then, and his mom went for a ride and everything. And it was just exciting. And, but then yet, they left Friday morning. And the next morning I get that dreaded phone call saying they were in a car accident. The truck burned up, the mother died, and Danny's all burnt up.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
And this happened in Indiana, in the corn country. And so I was like, oh my God, okay, what do I do? What is normally Gina does? She puts on her shoes and just keeps moving forward, without even realizing it. Like, of course, I'm like, why me? Why can't I be like my siblings? Why can't I have a marriage? Why can't I, not have problems in my life? And so, you know what I mean? No pain.
Mm-hmm.
And because, Danny loved me for me, where the sisters love me the way they love pizza, so it's such a difference.
Yeah.
And so I uprooted. I went to Indiana. He was saved in a way, but he was burnt on his body, half of his body. He saw his mother burn up because he wasn't lucky enough to get passed out in this terrible car accident to avoid a deer. So, and that's another thing. God, why couldn't you knock him out? And, why couldn't you just knock him out so he couldn't see his mother burn up and smell all that? But like I said, he was saved. And so we, of course, we reached out to the rooms of AA out there we didn't know anyone. So, to need help, here we are. He's all burnt up. He's in the hospital. I'm here. And people had stepped up, and welcomed us, helped us. And then we needed a place to stay out there. And we didn't have any money, nothing. And so a couple from the rooms, Jim and Brenda, they opened up their home. They gave us their car because we didn't have nothing. And so we're like, yeah, this is it, Danny. This is it. We got engaged. It's like, okay, we'll start over again. This is it. We'll start in Indiana. We have the support of AA. I was going to Al-Anon, so we had the support of Al-Anon, and then plus of his wound care because he needed totally wound care.
Yeah.
And so everything was great. We got an apartment. I did get a job waitressing, and he was looking for a job. But little behold, like now, alcoholism comes back into our lives, like the active, because what does an alcoholic do when they're in pain and suffering? They don't want to feel, especially seeing your mom burn up.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that?
No.
I mean, a non-alcoholic would drink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he picked up and he drank. And I was like floored. Like I couldn't understand. I was like, what happened to my perfect picture of my future? What happened to, I couldn't understand. I kind of flipped out on myself, on him and everything. I became manipulating, bargaining and everything. I kicked him out. I said, Danny, you need to get, before we get married in April, like this, like threatening, bribing, whatever. And then a month before our wedding day, I was called to go to buy his house, and make another long story short, he died. We found him dead in his apartment. He ended up, only God knows what happened, but
Yeah.
he fell, and I like to say he fell into the arms of God, and he hit his
Yeah.
head. That's, he died in that way.
Sorry.
Back then I was so ashamed. So because of the fact he was an alcoholic, he
Yeah.
died of this, and so ashamed. Like I'm thinking, oh no, he was sober when he died. But like I said, I don't know. And for a while, I kept saying, well, he was detoxing, and he fell. But but no, I mean, it was a horrific. And at that moment, Lisa, I gave up on life. I gave up on pursuing anything. I gave up perseverance. I just totally, totally gave up. I was like, why am I living? What's going on? I mean,
Yeah.
I came to a point at that time that, yeah, this is my life. Bring on the misery. Gina loves to suffer. Give it to her. Everything,
Mm-hmm.
everything. I'll just take it. I'll run. I'll take it. I'll just take it. You could be peace. You could have the happiness, and I'll just take it. And that's how I felt.
Hey, if you're ready to go deeper in your healing journey, join my 8-week workshop where we're going to help you get rid of all the bullshit that came from your childhood abuse and help you take back your power. Sign up today at women's childhood abuse healing workshop.com or click on the link below. I'd love to see you there and help you get on your healing journey. Mm-hmm.
And that's how I felt. So
I've been there
after
before.
that, I came back to the Jersey Shore, trying to start over the best way I can, and I, for some reason, I look back in hindsight that God was there, because at this point I hated God. I didn't want nothing to do with God. I really, but yet I did go into the room. I went into a meeting, an AA meeting, just, I don't know why, because at this point, Lisa, my motto was, why did Danny die and these people are sober? Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? So I go, and the only best way to find out is go into these rooms of AA, like that's how so I did. I went in these rooms, and the first meeting I went afterwards, this gentleman came up to me, and I'm crying, and it turns out that he knew Danny, and then he invited me to another meeting, which was a closed discussion meeting of AA. And I was like, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I said, Danny is. But he goes, just come and just say the desire not to pick up. That's like a traditional 3 in the meetings. And so I'm like, okay. And I did. And it took me a while. Like, I hated everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I went in there with, like, if ice could kill, they would be dead by now, all buried. And so I kept coming, and I kept going. I kept going. I was in tears. I was holding up the wall. I was so angry and so unforgiving. I was like, I was like in such a dark, dark place. Not only I was spiritual empty, I was in a dark, empty, cold cell within me, like a cold basement. That's how I felt,
Mm-hmm.
just with no windows and anything like that. And then as time went on, I kept going to these meetings, not as identified as an alcoholic, but I just kept going, and I just kept going. And I guess, because I was trying to find out where I belong, and the crusades of and there were people in there that had 20 years of sober, and they were nice. And I'm like, how could this be? I mean, like, you're 20 years, and how, like, uh, and so, but then one time a lady friend of mine had approached me like about 7 months later and says, Gina, did you ever think of your relationship with alcohol? You come here every day. And I was like, well, I'm here. And so once again, blinders came, had whatever vanished. And I looked at my relationship with alcohol, like when I was even 8 years old and so forth. And, alcohol was my best friend, was hiding from me. Like, the disease of alcoholism was hiding from me, was hiding in the convent. And because I could tell you stories of alcohol, me surrounded by alcohol.
Well, sure.
And then on April 2nd, 2015, God willing, this April, that I raised my hand. I said, my name is Gina, and I am an alcoholic. And I'm like, oh my God, who said that? Who said that? Because I'm not one. Go. And it happened to be the best, and as well as, painful day of my life, because when I had said that, every pain, hurt, unforgiveness, fear, insecurity, hatred, just opened up. It was like from my head to my toe was one open wound. And so it was suggested to, of course, go to meetings, get a sponsor, etc., and one day at a time. And here, God willing, in April, I'll be celebrating 10 years of sobriety, one day at a time. And now today, I'm free on the inside. Like there's no soul sickness on the inside. I mean, yes, it grows hand in hand. We're healing, and as I'm healing, I continue to grow. I'm not completely grown and I'm not completely healed because it's a journey.
Right.
It's a journey of faith. It's a new relationship, a new life that I received from the rooms of AA. And then in that, I developed my relationship back with my higher power, whom I call God. And now the funny thing, Lisa, is that he's the same God that's been with me from day one.
Yep, exactly.
And it took me a long time. So that's my story. That's my memoir. And the reason why I wrote my story was back when Danny died. That was about 12 years ago. Afterwards, I was in so much pain, and someone says, write out your pain, write out your pain. I wrote out my pain with Danny, and then a lot of pain of the sisters that I hid. Nobody knew what I was going through as a sister. Boom, 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 boom. And then I put that aside. I wrote 180 pages. And then about a few years ago, a friend of mine read it and says, oh, you need to read now where your recovery is. And this is a message of hope and strength to spread to the world, to those who read my book, to those who hear these podcasts, is know that you're not alone, you are loved, and do not give up.
Very good. That's a very interesting story, and I'm sure we could dive in even deeper on so much of that, especially living with the nuns. I can't even imagine. And there's so much there. I deal with I over the last probably 12 years or so, I've done a lot of religious deconstructing and reconstructing. Yeah. I didn't realize it for the first 10 years. That's what I was doing. But it's interesting because one thing that never changed was God. Like that is the one thing that I've always hung on to. It's all the other stuff that goes along with religion that I've questioned and trying to understand it. And I've been a Christian God's been in my life literally as long as I can remember. I don't even remember who introduced him to me. I just remember going to the Sunday school every Sunday morning. The little bus would come pick me up all by myself. Nobody went with me. And I just loved church. And so, yeah, it's interesting. So I've always, as far back as I can remember, have had a relationship with God. It's man that's messed it up. And I'm not talking about man. I'm talking about people, and that's the thing that we need to realize is that, we're all a bunch of hurting people and
people hurt people.
Hurting people hurt people. And, and so, yeah, it's been an interesting 12 years to say the least. It's and
I was in the convent for 12 years. So there's something God has brought us together.
Yeah,
I don't know what the number 12 is, but
exactly. Yeah, seriously. And yeah, because a lot of what you're saying, I can relate to, like not being able to, I don't want to harp on this, but you've brought up some really good points and like, you're not allowed to be yourself. And that was the same thing with me. I wasn't allowed to be me as soon as and I'm not a bad person, I'm not a bad person. I'm kind of like you though, I have a personality. I like, and these people, they didn't like that. And so I would, and so I learned to shut that down even more. That's what I learned to do, is to shut that down and shut my voice down more and more and more. So on top of having the childhood abuse that shut down my voice, then I got into religion, which then shut my voice down some more. And you get chastised. And I will tell you, and my friends that are listening, this is not anything I am saying for anybody else. This is 100% for me. But I just know that my relationship with God over the last 12 years has grown a lot. And I'm hearing him even more than I did before. It's like, there's just like a real clear communication. I'm the one that's messing up the communication, not him. You know what I mean? But it's just interesting, the whole religious thing. I actually have a guest coming on that talks about religious deconstruction and reconstruction. I can't wait to talk about that one.
And everything you said, Lisa, it is so true. I identify what sent me, what you've gone through, what you shared, and it is because there was a point when I was, going through this rough time. I said to a priest, "Why, why?" And he just says there's original sin. He goes like we all
Yeah.
fall,
Yeah.
there, and because I was a very
Me too.
trustworthy person. I would trust. Why are you hurting me?
Right.
Why am I getting this? Why am I going through the crucifixion? Why am I going
Right.
through the persecution and being all that? And now in hindsight, like if I had what I have today, like the spiritual, the heart to heart relationship, I wouldn't have put up with that crap 30 years ago.
Exactly.
I would have known who I was. So what God has is can groom me into knowing who I am.
Right.
And who I am. I'm truly a child of God. Granted, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm a faithful woman of God. That the disease of alcoholism brought me back to God in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like it goes hand in hand. My sobriety and God goes hand in hand. And like you said, you continue to grow, grow, grow. And I'm not here to badger. I mean, I don't know how the community is today, and
Right.
God bless them,
Right.
and let go of the forgiveness and
Mm-hmm.
everything. It is
Mm-hmm.
what it was. But I know today that's my story.
Yeah.
That was my story that was unfolding. Granted, I hated it, but yet it's part of who I am today.
Right.
And now today my story's unfolding. And yes, life goes on. Challenges happens, health, family, death, things happen. But yet I have the tools, I have the program, but I have God that I could trust.
Mm-hmm.
Not them, not people, but God I could trust to give me that strength to get me through no matter what. No matter what.
And one of the
So
things that we also, you and I, have in common is because, we both were put in the position of having to take care of others, that I've learned not to do this anymore, but for years, especially when I was in survival mode, I had to take care of everybody else and put all my needs aside. And that's probably the reason why you finally hit rock bottom. You finally said enough. And that's the thing that I want our listening friends to know too, is that yes, there's those of us that are have the gift of helping others. The first thing we need to do though is help ourselves. Because in order for us to be able to help others, we've got to take care of ourselves. And those of us that pour out, which is what you did, and you pour yourself out and you pour yourself out, pretty soon there's nothing left to pour out anymore. Yeah. You have to be infilled. You have to take that time to infill yourself first.
Yeah. And so true. I totally agree, because I do believe each one of us, listeners, myself, we all have a story that's unfolding one day at a time, 1 minute. And it's how we react, and it's the tools, and it's however it is. But that's what I've learned, is take care of myself before I could help others. And even to this day. So it's a growing, learning process. Everything is I learn and I grow. I'm like, aha, I know now. Mm-hmm. And these are seeds that have been planted. We all have seeds. All of our listeners have seeds being planted, but it's God, it's Buddha, whoever their faith is, lets it grow according to their time and way.
Right.
And that's how I look at it, because I'm like, aha, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Oh, I like that way instead of going to the negative way, or to the dark way, Yes, I want more peace. I don't want misery anymore. Yeah, maybe misery could come to me, but I could love it, or have a way with God to handle it, or to
manage it,
let go. Yeah. And manage it. And even to feel it. One thing I learned, it's okay to feel.
I know.
And like you caught on when I was a child, I never said I was hurt. I never said I was feeling angry about what's going on. I never did. Even in the convent. I remember one time in the convent, I told the spiritual director at the time, I told him I'm angry at the sisters. His response was, you shouldn't be angry. You can't be angry. You got to look at yourself.
Wow.
Boom. More and more thing to cave in. And then, being sober, finding God again. It's like, no, I can be angry. I can cry. I could be fearful, but it's not going to control me anymore.
Yeah.
It's not going to paralyze me.
I know, that's what's so empowering. And that's the one thing I've shared a lot with the listeners, is that, there's when you start your healing process and you are understanding it more, there's a space between when you are hurt or when something happens to you and your reaction to it. You can put that space in there that'll keep you from just acting out and just reacting
Yeah.
without having thought. And because, like I have said for a
Mm.
long time, I hate cleaning up the messes that I make. So I try now to have that space and not, it's much more natural
Yeah.
for me. But in the beginning, it was really hard because my mouth got in my way. And I would
Yeah.
just want to say stuff because I was angry and I was hurt. And, so my reaction
Yeah.
was to lash out. And the empowering thing is, as you're on your healing journey, you do get to that point where you do get hurt. You do.
Yeah.
And the thoughts cross your mind of what you want to say, but you have that moment of pause so that you can
Yeah.
get yourself together
Breathe.
and big breathe,
And
breathe. And
and
then you can react.
and also I've learned you could give it 24 hours
Yeah.
before answering, or you could rest on it. They don't need that answer right now.
Correct.
They don't need that reaction right now. Okay, I go for a walk, do something,
Yeah.
go to the bathroom, breathe, and say to yourself, okay, I could, how important is it? I could give it another 24 hours before responding to whatever that situation is.
That's a really good point, because one of the things I used to do is I wanted to get that checked off my list. So I would just respond, right? And you make more of a mess because I'm responding at that moment in the way I'm feeling, instead of having the time to process, which is what I call it. I have my time that I process it and work it through my mind and then come up with the right resolution. But I used to just respond immediately and get myself in deeper trouble.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with the pause. And there's nothing wrong with saying to someone, can I get back to you about that? Because I think I need a minute. Because I say that I'm processing.
Yeah.
I need a minute.
Yeah. And that's okay. That is okay that's what I've learned. It's okay with everything. It's just okay. It's okay to feel. It's okay to cry. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel this way.
Giving yourself permission.
Yeah, you have every right.
Mm-hmm.
You give yourself permission. It's okay, to forgive, and it's okay. Okay, right now I can't forgive. Okay, but I'm aware that I can't forgive.
Right.
I mean, I know for myself, the biggest thing is that first I had to forgive God because I blamed him for everything.
Mm-hmm.
He was my number one blamer. And then I had to forgive myself, in so many ways. And that's another, way of healing and helping to be the person you are. And in that, even helping to, react and act in other ways, when situation hits.
Yeah.
It's a life process. And I learned that, it's an ongoing journey.
Right.
And it's not gonna be, I'm not being cured in this lifetime for today. Yeah. I mean, so I just do the best I can to what I have for my best ability.
I love that you say that it's okay. It's okay, because when you were saying that, it's so funny. I was thinking about me and my old way of thinking that nothing was okay. Like I had to do everything perfect. And it wasn't that it was put upon me as a child. And so it's something I took into my adult life, but I'm just thinking like something happens like, oh, I can't do it perfect. So I can't do it at all. It wasn't okay to make a mistake. It wasn't okay to go back and have to redo it. I had to do it right the first time, or I was a complete failure. It's so interesting the way our minds think. And so I'm glad you said that, because it is okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it is. And I think we have another thing in common, because I'm a perfectionist too. I like to put the square in the circle or something like. I mean, I'm still healing from that, and I laugh at myself.
Me too.
I'm laughing. Things happen. It's like, oh yeah, okay, all right.
It's kind of fun that's now.
It becomes obvious, and also what I've learned is when I go through frustrations and when I get squirrely in my mind, and I realize that I'm off the beam. I'm off my spiritual beam.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, breathe back, pause, get back. God help me, or whatever it may be. How do you want me to react to this? Okay. When I take things personal, or because I'm a very sensitive person too.
Of course.
And it's true, because things, yes, I've been healed from my past, but things come up and it triggers like, oh yeah, that's, with sister, whatever. And so it's like, okay, God, come in. I invite you into that pain, into that healing, into that trauma, whatever it may be. but I know today it doesn't control me.
Right.
Like today I want to live, Lisa. Oh, I'm participating in life.
Right.
There was a time I really didn't give a hoot about my life, or I didn't want to be part of life. I wouldn't kill myself. I did pray every night, Lord, please take me, tonight. And then I would wake up in the morning. I said, oh crap, I got another day to live.
I did that too. I've done that too. I have done that too.
I've got so much in common, but anyhow.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I'm glad that you mentioned as well, you're mentioning a lot of really good things is, when your mind starts getting scrambled, when you start, that's a really good self-awareness tip. Because there's something up. If your mind starts getting scrambled or there's racing thoughts, that's a time to go, wait, hold on. It's time to take a pause and figure out what's going on here. Because, especially when they're scrambled, when things aren't making sense. And, I call it craziness in my head. When that happens, usually I'm triggered. There's something going on and it catches my attention. I'm like, okay, wait, because this does not feel good. And as you practice that over time, that becomes more natural where you'll notice it much quicker and you don't have to go down that rabbit hole that you did so many times.
And I mean, there's so much I could share, but one more thing is that I also realized today, if I get fear for something that I had from my past, I realize it's not there anymore. I've been healed.
Yes.
Like I claim my healing. I claim it. No, because I do believe in the evil, the dark side. I want you to say, oh, keep harp. No, I've been done with that. Be gone. Be gone.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Let's move forward. I did, pilot, whatever. I don't need to gloat on. I don't need to bring it up. It's done. It's done, and,
right.
And that's I tell you, it's fun, this journey really today, because I get to learn a lot about myself. Still,
exactly.
There's pain, and pain still happens, but it's like, okay, I have the tools. I mean, I may have a depressed day one day, but it's not forever. I get through this.
Yes.
This too shall pass, and
exactly. This too shall pass. Yes, that is the saying I have said so many times to myself. Or this is only a season. This is only a season. It's just a season.
Amen.
Well,
all right,
Gina, this has been great. And I always ask my guests this last question. And what do you want to leave our listeners with?
I always want to say that you're not alone. Do not lose hope, and you are loved. And if nobody told you they love you today, we do.
That's right. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And